Really
Yeah.
quick
Go for it.
at the
All right,
end.
we should be live. What's going on, Super Comic Books fam? It's been a minute since we've had a show. We've got the one and only Luigi with us here today. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, man? I'm chilling, bro. Chilling, bro. Successfully funded.
Congratulations, man. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going.
No, I'm not saying like it just. I was saying that I feel like we're not. I'm not reaching the platitude that you have. I mean, depends how you look on it, right? Like, what would you make? 11K?
We
No,
were
I'm
at
not.
10.8. We're at
So if you
10.8.
divide that by two, right? If you're doing a per issue basis, I feel like intrusive thoughts doing better.
I mean,
Little.
we could do the numbers, but I think I have maybe 100 more people that back. So you're still the little bro in this one. But Trevor is but we're little bro to Trevor because Trevor is at how much are you at, buddy? You're having a really sick campaign too.
Yeah, like 11-4 right now.
Good
But
shit, man.
that's just the start, man. I don't I think that's a new floor, I think. And I think you guys are in the position to feel the same way about where you're at now. Everybody's only going up, baby. So let's keep that rolling.
Definitely. I mean, I'm trying to keep that momentum up with the next one. I think Stokes as well. But we are all just new guard creators and small
New
fish in a
kids
big
on
pond.
the block. You
Whatever,
guys keep saying new guard. It
whatever.
doesn't
We
even
got
make sense.
the man himself, Charlie Stickney. What's going
Hey,
on,
how's it
man?
going? It's a President's Day weekend, Monday evening, and I am excited to be here. My kids were not in school today, so it's nice to have some adult companionship tonight.
I
Just putting
mean,
that out there.
yeah, no, definitely. My whole family was home today as well. I was wondering, it's like, why isn't anyone going to work? Um, but yeah, no, we're glad to have you here for you to bless us with your Kickstarter knowledge. Congratulations on funding and hitting passing 50 racks, $50,000. How does it feel?
Well, it obviously it feels really good. I think it'd be
Yeah,
disingenuous to say that I don't like doing well in Kickstarter, but I'm really fortunate that I have an incredible fan base that keeps coming back to to support the projects that I do, and that I get to work with some incredible artists, and together we and together we're trying to build something. And I think what Trevor was talking about earlier is in terms of like setting new floors, and it's a progression. So each campaign makes it easier for you to make more money going forward. That said, depending on what kind of campaign you're doing, certain campaigns lend themselves to making money more than other campaigns. I think like it's you guys joke back and forth, but like the kind of book that Stokes you're trying to do right now, like that is a more personal tale in the sense that it's not a big like I think look at the box office at the movies. Like there's Avengers and then there's Tar, right? Those are two very different types of movies, and each filmmaker going in to making say Avengers or whatever the big Maverick, Top Gun Maverick, you have different expectations based on the genre of film it is, what you're trying to make, and different things seem like different. You have different barometers for what success is going to be,
You're saying
and
my
so
stuff has artistic merit and Chris's has feet.
damn.
I'm saying when it comes to making money, there are different types of genres that hit harder.
Okay.
He's
Like
saying
I
that you
think I
don't know
think
how to chase the bag, Stokes.
but no, but I think it's really important that we all make, because none of this is easy. So it's important that you're making stories that you want to make, and whatever that success is, that's great. But it doesn't matter. Like if you're just making a story to make money, studios do that too. Then they go and fund their passion projects with their big blockbusters. But I think it's just important to always keep that in context. What kind of range that you're going to have based on the project you're putting out.
So I think this is a good transition as I pull up your wildly successful campaign, how you decided to transfer your audience from White Ash to Galarian. Why did you choose Galarian? What was the thought process going behind choosing this character specifically to be who you focused on, and how you expanded your universe?
Well, so White Ash is it's a big epic grounded fantasy story. The quick pitch on that for anyone who doesn't know, it's like I use Romeo and Juliet meets Lord of the Rings in rural Pennsylvania. So it's grounded fantasy set in coal mining country. But it's a modern day tale about these different people, these different races that are trapped in modern day Pennsylvania. However, there's a lot that came before that. If you like think about the paradigm of Lost, one of the things that Lost did well, which was a new style of storytelling that we hadn't seen on television, at least in my memory, was that you had a narrative going forward, and then you had these flashbacks where they would sort of develop the backstory and the history, and it recontextualized everything that you were currently watching. And so for me, the White Ash is the modern day narrative, but there's a lot of backstory that I need to get out also that's going to recontextualize what you're currently seeing and your understanding of that narrative as it goes forward. And that's where Glarian comes in. When I finished the first arc of White Ash, we did put out a hardcover edition, and we added a Glarian short story, which began this process, and people love that. So sometimes it's about listening to your audience, and people started telling me they love this character, and that was great, because the Glarian Thane love story is a huge portion about what is currently, I mean, like so many things that happened 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago come into play, between their relationship, their dynamic in the modern day narrative of White Ash. So all those factors came together. It was information I needed to get out. She was a fan favorite character, and it let me do things that I wasn't doing in White Ash. And part of that was that, for the most part, White Ash is like a PG-13 story. And with that narrative, because that's also a little bit more commercial. That's that commercial zone, right?
There's some steamy stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a little bit here and there. I like to say it's a PG-13 story with R-rated characters that come to visit from time to time. And Glarian was one of those R-rated characters who came to visit. So when we went back to tell her story, for me, intrinsically, it seemed like it needed to be an R-rated story to sort of honor the heritage of that character. So it's a little bit more of an adult narrative, which I think has let us tap into an entirely different fan base. That's not to say it's, there's some sexuality in it, but it's not a sex story. It's, it's in the Game of Thrones vein. And I think so that's brought a lot of different readers in. And one of the great things about having a spinoff is it has its own fan base, and together, each series kind of keeps feeding the other as I release more volumes. So
would you say there's a large, obviously there's some overlap between the Galarian audience and the White Ash. Is there a big audience for people that just back the Galarian, like that don't have an interest in White Ash?
Well, I mean, so our last Galarian campaign was roughly 1,770 backers, maybe something like that. And the White Ash campaign that followed that was around 1,350.
Wow.
So there's about 400 more people who are backing Galarian than are backing White Ash right now.
White Ash is the spinoff.
Yeah, well, it's sort of kind of become that way, but it's also, it's aside from the adult nature, it's two different things. One's high fantasy, one's grounded fantasy. So, maybe on Kickstarter there are more fans for that genre. But I'm very happy with how both series are doing, and it gives me lots of flexibility in the ways I want to tell them and the artists I want to work with, and and to be able to make decisions long term about something, about how to put out the stories, how to pace the stories, because I don't have that same kind of a sword hanging over my head that I need to sort of hit this amount of money or this amount of backers by this next book, or I can't keep producing it. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to think long term as opposed to just issue to issue.
I wanted to ask real quick, how much does having like a back catalog help with the campaign numbers? Because this will happen. I'll go to like Pat's campaign and I'll like buy something, and then you have to buy like the previous issue. You have to buy like the catch up tier and stuff like that. So yeah, how much of this, like how much of the sales are back catalog essentially?
Well, it depends on the campaign, and I
Mhm.
think Trevor, you've probably had this too because you're on issue what? What issue of this is this for you
6.
right now? 6.
6.
Okay, yeah. So as the campaigns build, you have those catch-up tiers, which are very helpful because they raise your average pledge amount a lot, especially with the new backers coming in. If you have something like Backer Kit Launch, it actually tracks like your pledge total for your returning backers versus your new backers. And those metrics become more important as you have more campaigns. But I think I'm tracking somewhere roughly around $41 for returning backers per pledge and 60 something dollars for new backers. And so like that difference is these people who want to catch up, because I have two different types of catch up tiers. I have one that's just White Ash and Galarian, and then I have a catch up tier that's everything, which has the other books I've written too, like the game and also How I Slept My Way Through College and the Tales from My Freshman Year. But and that also goes to thinking long term. When you print, if you raise enough money when you finish Intrusive Thoughts to not just print 200 copies for your backers, but if you can look at it long term and say, okay, I've got 200 that have to go to my backers, but I'm going to do a print run of 1,000, and that kills all my profit, and now I'm back to zero. But I got these issues at $1.75 a piece versus $2.50 a piece, and I'm sitting on 800 more copies, because then that's stock that's paid for. So then when you do that catch up tier the next issue, the profit margin is so much higher, because really the only new costs are for that new issue, and everything is paid off going forward. And so for me, with White Ash, with everything I've done, I've been able to kind of work on that model where I try to print as much as I can, especially for the first issue, and then I taper it off as I'm approaching the collection, because you don't want to print like 5,000 of issue 4, and then the next thing you do is a hardcover, and that's all you're going to want to sell going forward, because that's an easier item to sell because it's a higher price item. So it kind of is a little bit like a bell curve, and unless you can afford a lot. So if you can afford a lot, maybe you go 3,000 your first issue, 2,000 your second issue, 1,500 your third, your fourth issue maybe you're 1,000, and then again, it depends on what your numbers are for your campaign, right? And like whatever makes sense to scale for you. But like that's kind of how I think of it. And so I just want to make sure I don't have to go back to print on any of the issues that I've done until I reach a trade collection. And then once I have the trade collection, I only want to sell that trade collection going forward, or occasionally bring some of these back issues out of the vault now and then. Like I did this on this campaign, and that's something else that I like to do is, okay, it was Valentine's Day. I had a retro Valentine's Day White Ash cover from White Ash #2. I hadn't sold that in a couple of years, so I dropped that in the campaign. We dropped 15 of them, and they were gone in 20 minutes. It's like just something that I can bring out that maybe wasn't selling 2 years ago, but now it's a rare thing that people who have, like the 1,000 new people who have come to the campaign have never seen before. So like you just have to kind of think about all of those things long term.
Yeah, Trevor does similar things. Like I know Trevor will send messages and will have timed sort of rewards, or like increase your pledge by this amount and you're eligible for this. So I think it's a super strong tactic. If you want to talk about that a little bit more, Trevor.
Yeah, I mean, I followed a pretty similar model. I mean, early on, I was broke and I didn't know what kind of traction I would have. So my first print run was rather small, and I actually scaled up as I went along. And eventually we got to the point where those earlier issues were close to selling out. So when I reprinted issue 1, we went with a higher scale, because I also figured you always have that audience at a con that isn't willing to spend $20, $30. So even when I get to trade, even if I had a little bit of an overstock on issue 1, well, then that's a customer who is going to spend nothing prior and is willing to kind of take the dip in. And if they like it, maybe they'll go even further. But I kind of looked at it the same way as Charlie, although I think maybe I had less of a reason to, because I had no success. I really saw it the same way. And when I run these campaigns, that base goal is basically roughly what I need to break even. And I see every issue I sell after that as 100% profit, because I've factored out the cost to print and the cost to produce the artwork, amongst other things, right? In that goal. So I see that as already gone. And yeah, like I think it's really big when you're trying to build that back catalog, whether it's for a future Kickstarter or for public appearances, signings, leveraging other sales channels, right? Like shops or your own personal website. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room off the top. And given that my material is pretty inexpensive, I've been told I undercharge by quite a bit. Being able to eke out that little bit of extra margin post production of a higher unit quantity is beneficial for sure. But like Charlie said, you got to be willing to give up those short-term gains because it is costly. And it does take up a lot of space. I am out of a living room, so be prepared for that. But I think in the long run, if you're looking to build a business long term, and you have the capital to float yourself, I would do it every day of the week. I'd be curious though, Charlie, do you have like a going ratio that you like to overprint compared to what you see in the initial Kickstarter campaign?
It's not so much a ratio as much as it's how long is it going to take me to get to the trade. And I know that approximately on Kickstarter, I get anywhere from 20 to 30% new backers per campaign. So if I have a big, so like I look at like the last one that I did for the game, and that was roughly 1,000 backers. So of those, though, they're not all print backers. So say it's 650 print backers. I look at that and say, okay, next time out, there's probably going to be at 150 people who will be new to this, who will want the print tier. Like that's, so I can kind of use that calculus to start thinking about how much that I need to print on this one, to print going forward. Because I am thinking like with Glarian, when I did number 2, and it was number one was just actually too successful, in the sense that I didn't think, that it would sell out as quickly in subsequent campaigns. So I already, even though the initial print run for Glarian 1 was 3,000, I've already had to go back to print for that first issue after the second Kickstarter. So I thought I was printing enough, but it turned out I wasn't, which again is a good problem to have. But sometimes you just do what you can.
Yeah.
And then like I used, and I always think about it long term. So even when Glarian 2 was really profitable, I looked at that and I said, where do I need to, I need to do another 1,000 copies of Glarian 1. So I'm going to factor that into my overall budget for Glarian 2. So I went back to print. So boom, there's another 2,500 that was added to my losses there. And then I also looked at what else am I doing this year? Okay, I'm doing San Diego Comic-Con. Well, I'm going to expense everything of San Diego off into Glarian 2. So that was like thrown in there. And I was bringing out a couple of artists. I had a table. I was doing, I was paying for food for everyone. So I put all those at convention expense. So I find different things to expense against, because the other thing that you have to sort of weigh is, if you're really successful, the other problem that you have to start figuring out is taxes, right? And I mean, it's not, again, we all want to pay our share, but like if all of a sudden you're sitting on 40K worth of, self-employed taxes, that gets hit at a really high rate, much higher than your working rate. So if all of a sudden you can start investing that into, things that will maybe pay off down the road for you, when maybe you're in a better position, or you can figure out how to amortize some of those costs. I think it's just important to look at everything that you're doing, if you're trying to be a self-publisher, as this is your business. And so what are your cash cows going to be? How is that going to finance the rest of the year? Making sure you have profit loss tables, that you're figuring out where your expenses go. and not doing Galarian 2 at the end of November, so I get that gigantic check from Kickstarter right before the end of the year, and I don't have a chance to spend any of it, right? And then all of a sudden, the IRS is saying, "Hey, you just made $40,000 or $50,000," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to spend all that, but you just don't have a chance to." So I think it's important to look at the year, to plan it out, to say, like this. That's why this Galarian campaign is in February. I look at this as I knew it would do well. It's at the beginning of the year, and then I'll have cash reserves to play and to allocate with the other projects that I want to do, going forward. If I have something that I think is going to be a smaller campaign, I can maybe stack that next to make sure that if that doesn't do as well, that everything is covered, that I can keep going. So it's just look at it as all one big pool that you're working on, and not just keep cashing out after every Kickstarter. It's your business.
So that's you touched on a lot of really interesting things there, and the building, the keeping it going. So how did you have the vision after White Ash, your first campaign, doing very well for a first campaign on Kickstarter? How did you take that momentum, and were you thinking about Galarian right after that? Like where was your mind at when you were like, okay, this is something I can do, and how did you game plan from there? You're muted.
Do you mean after the very first White Ash campaign?
Yes.
Like White Ash 1?
Yeah, White Ash 1, White Ash 1, 2.
So we were talking a little bit about this in a Twitter stream the other night.
Right.
For me, it was really because I think anyone who's listening who's just maybe done one Kickstarter campaign, you have to realize that there's an artificial bump in your first Kickstarter campaign that's all about the friends and family who have come to support you. And then I said this before, and then you do number 2, and they're all like, "Wait, you're doing this again?" I don't know. Right. I don't know if we're going to write you another check, but we'll say good job, and you can go do it. So I think the important thing between your first and your second campaign is figuring out who your fans are from that first campaign, who aren't just your friends, and building more of those people. And then as you go into your second campaign, after your second campaign, then you probably have a fan base that's locked down, and you can start extrapolating things out. And then you hit your third, and you're like, okay, this is how many people who are real fans who have come back from 2 to 3. This is again, if we're talking about serializing comics, because serializing comics where you're doing the same series is different than doing a bunch of different graphic novels, which might be in different genres, which might be, have different artists. If you're talking about building a fan base on a series that's serialized, I think it's somewhere between the second and third issue where you can see what kind of momentum it has, that you can start figuring out where you start figuring out what your plans are. And I think this is really true in any business that you're doing. You don't want to make long-term plans on an incomplete data set. So you don't want to jump to conclusions, oh, this is how I'm going to always do, and start figuring that out. I think, so many, like the pandemic in particular is a good example of this. And if you talk about the direct market, there's a lot of publishers that are in trouble right now. There are stores that are in trouble right now because there was a big boom during the pandemic. And too many people, too many companies on all sides of the equation thought, hey, this is the new normal. And they didn't sort of wait to see if it really was or it would stable. And so they started spending, today on the coin of tomorrow. And then that coin of tomorrow has not come in because things have kind of started contracting again. So that's why I say, like, you need a couple of campaigns to figure out where a series is going, where your fan base is going. And, you can always build on things, but that'll at least give you a reasonable base to work from.
Yeah, I didn't have a single, I don't know if I say this publicly, I don't think I had a single fan member back my campaign, which made me feel like it was more sustainable, like it was a good floor. And I don't think a lot of close friends either. So yeah, my fourth campaign, it feels like entirely people that are going to stick around, to your point.
Right. How about you, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I had some family early on, not a heck of a lot, and as you said, they dropped off quick. I don't know. I mean, I think that I'm a weird case because I despite like the cash, I don't do the volume of customer that most people do. And I don't necessarily know how I can speak to volume. I think a big part of it is like my Kickstarter story page is too long. It's too cluttered and people don't look through it. I think, and I'm curious to see how much of an impact that's drawing in terms of people just not being willing to back the campaign in general because it's too long. But only time will tell with that. I think for me, the focus has been on forming really, really strong relationships with my readership. And just being very, very open and honest. Like the stories come from a very personal place. And I think where in some cases people might fault me for not marketing as much of the sort of genre elements of the story, I really do lean into the personal side. You know, I never shy away from it being a story about identity and about reconciling that with memory. And when I talk to people at shows, like I think it comes through because I will sit and I will talk to them for 10, 15, however much time they want. So I think that when people are able to really feel that level of palpable gratitude, they lock in. So I've been fortunate, despite not being the best at marketing to a larger audience. I've been really, really lucky to have a very fierce camp of people that got me and that believe in the material. So yeah, I mean, I've still got a lot to learn though when it comes to, you know, increasing the volume of audience members, certainly. But you know, I've been fortunate enough to really form, I think, really solid bonds with the ones that I do have.
I think those other audience members will also come when you eventually do whatever the next project is, right? Like you've had all these projects for specifically the Helix project. And once you're on to your next thing, and this is done, right? This is the last issue. Like now you can be like, I have a completed, it's not just a volume. It's like, this is, you know, front to back. This is totally done. You'll be able to go to another group of people and another audience. And maybe this is an idea that sticks a little bit better, right? Like
Yeah.
with Control Z, like Control Z did like 200 more almost than my best sound effect campaign. It was the first one, right? Some IPs just hit better, right? Just like Charlie was saying with, you know, Galarian just hits harder than White Ash, right? And you don't really know what that thing will be. But no, you're doing awesome, man. Like
Thank you, dude.
like Stokes and I were saying before, we're always thinking like, how can we get that average pledge up? As Charlie was saying with the you know, catch up tiers and things like that, like getting that average pledge up is really important because a lot of these people are going to spend money on your campaign regardless, right? So it's finding how to get that maximum money that they're willing to give you, right? Like a lot of people, they're going to buy a book at 25, they're going to buy it at 30, right? And things like that.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest, honestly, I would even go as far as to say my biggest failure was being under the impression that being hyper focused on delivering value would bring me volume that would then make up for it. And that was totally wrong. And it was a hill that I died on for pretty much all 6 issues of this series. But I realized that sometimes, you know, with that core audience, they want to give you the money, but they want the product for it. And if you deliver that product, they will come in spades. So, you know, I think it's important to still make sure that the reader, that the consumer feels like their dollar is going a decent way. I know I certainly feel that way, you know, as a creator and as somebody who supports others' campaigns. You know, sometimes I look at campaigns and I'm like, you want how much? Like, I understand the position you're in, but that's extortion. And so it's certainly a fine line to walk. But I appreciate the kind words, man. Thank you. It's definitely been a hustle, and I look forward to the future, you know. Like everything, my next couple of projects are very different from what I'm doing now. And I can only hope that having that really, really fierce core group are going to be there to follow me and my growth as a storyteller, as opposed to just the IP. But again, another thing where only time will tell.
I think,
Trevor, go ahead, Stokes.
Please, Charlie.
Well, I was just going to say, I do think when you're talking about value on Kickstarter and price points, this one of the best things that I think about Kickstarter is it's reset the value point of what a comic book should be.
Mhm.
Because in the direct market, they are priced, and people will hate hearing this because people always are, I can't believe this went up from $3 to $4 or $4 to $5. They're priced too low. They're priced too low in the direct market based on the return the companies need to make to be able to pay artists living wages, to be able to pay creators living wages, to be able to keep making comics on the profit margin for comics. So as long as you kind of start there and realize that the price point in the direct market is too low, you shouldn't feel bad about charging a lot more for what, in the sense, is like an artisan project on Kickstarter. You know, like I always go back to like this. If Marvel released a book with a 5,000 print run, a 20-page book, and they just put a variant cover on it, like that book is going to be $15, $20 easy, right? Because it's only 5,000 print run. And like, there's almost no book on Kickstarter that has a 5,000 print run. Right? Like everything is somewhere between like 100 to 3,000, right? And so, you know, you already are this super limited variant. You know, you're working with a different set of economics, and people understand that. So I would say, like, what I would say to you is, if you still want to deliver value, just go through and see what the average price per issue is on Kickstarter, and see how far below it you are. You can still be on the lower end, but I think you could probably add $5 to the price of what you're selling and still be on the absolute lowest end of the tier. You know, so like, it's like that. So I think you can still do that, offer your value, but, you know, just make the value you're offering more commensurate with the market.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of points, and that's actually something that Pat gave me advice on with this most recent one as well. And yeah, it's like I said, it's a hill that I think I died on kind of foolishly. You know, it's hard for me to fathom like what we could be doing if I charged a little bit more of a commensurate amount of money. And you are right. And I think another part of it is too, 9 out of 10 times, whether it's like the intimacy, you know, that you're referring to in the artisan nature of Kickstarter, or like the physical print product just generally being better than most of what you're going to get on the direct market, you know, as opposed to, like, you know, the larger companies are going back to what is basically newspaper print again. And they're charging $6-7, and, you know, most of us are, you know, you're probably getting anywhere from a 55 to 85 pound interior with, you know, 85 to 130 pound cover. So yeah, you're 100% right. And that's definitely a lesson that I wish didn't take me 6 Kickstarters to finally nail down, but it's in the noggin, man. I can't erase that now.
It's something I'm learning also, Trevor. If you look at the first 4 issues of Alpha and where the prices are, it's definitely not where they could be. And I mean, that's Charlie Stickney he's the man, right? He's definitely set the like a very strong market and like something to emulate when it comes to pricing, when it comes to single issues, and exactly how to do that, right? Like variants, you know, stuff like that. Like Charlie, you're the master at this kind of stuff. So maybe a clickbaity sort of question so that we can hopefully farm a clip later. But
you know, full well.
No, but it's not a bad question. Charlie, as after this amazing campaign that you run, if you were to go back to Charlie back in the day before you launched White Ash 1, what would you change and what would you tell him to improve that first campaign and to make the most money that he could on Kickstarter?
Well, I think I would say, hey, I don't want you to tell you this, but this is actually a lot harder than you think it is going to be. But you're not going to find that. It's going to be a lot easier for you than you think it's going to be. So so don't worry. I mean, I say that because I've just been very fortunate that it's been a very smooth ride for me. And I didn't really kind of know what I was getting into. And if I had known what I was getting into, I probably would have been terrified with the scope of what I was trying to take on. So my first campaign did really well because I have, you know, I mean, I'm also probably a little bit older than most of you guys. So I was at a stage in life where I had a lot of friends and family who had disposable income to help out on my first campaign. I think that also makes a big difference. You know, when you have friends who are like $25 isn't anything to me, or even $100, you know, then all of a sudden you can sort of start padding those early numbers on your campaign. And so that was very beneficial. But the one piece of advice I would definitely say to my earlier self is, again, going back to this print run thing. With White Ash 1, I did an overall print run of 1,000 copies, which, you know, is a pretty sizable run for a newer creator doing their first comic. But I did 750 of the A cover. I did 250 of the B cover. And I would, you know, I would obviously bump that way up because we were sold out by like the third or fourth issue. The other thing I would say, and this is actually a good piece of advice, is that Charlie thought what he was going to do was he was going to do his Kickstarter, but then he took an ash can of the first, I think it was first 20 pages of the book, because the first issue of White Ash was a 52-page book. Maybe it was like first 18 pages, something around that. And I went down to San Diego Comic-Con because I thought I was going to get a publisher that way by handing out this ash can to publishers. And it was a limited print run of maybe 25 or 50 copies of this ash can. I think it was 25 copies. I would say, Charlie, don't randomly give those out to strangers. I want you to slab every single one of those ash cans. This is the first print of something that's going to be going for years. If you had those now, you could sell those for $1,000 a piece. Instead, you know, publishers took them and tossed them because most of them at the time weren't taking unsolicited submissions from anybody. Again, that's the thing as a newer creator you don't know, is there are legal channels that you really should be thinking about. And even though I had representation from my time in the entertainment industry and he was there with me, they still wouldn't take it from him. But like, yeah, like these ash cans disappeared. And I had like one or two friends who I gave one to and was like, oh yeah, I left it in the backseat of my car and the sun cooked through the window and it all bubbled up. So there's like one or two of these left in existence that I know of. And I wish I had all 25 to be able to monetize. But really, like the most important advice is that big print run. It's about constantly thinking long-term, that you're on the right path, that this is a community that embraces new creators as long as you are a person who's looking to give back to the community. Because I do think like the independent comics community is an amazing place as long as you are a giver, not just a taker. If you come and you're like, hey, I want to be part of this, what can I do? People will embrace you.
Absolutely. My question was, so a while back, y'all had a space, and essentially Pat's model is doing volume by volume, and you've always done issue by issue. And to me, the volume sounds more appealing because, like, I'm not trying to. A 10-issue series, you know, can take God knows how long. So you're doing like you're doubling up now, right? Like you're doing deluxe issues, or you're dropping 2 issues at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to sort of look at these things again based on the number of backers you have. And then, Trevor, I think this is probably something you can start doing too when you sort of look forward. If you know you have a certain number of people coming back to back your campaign, it's like trying to split that difference between doing a trade and doing a single issue. So I've started doing double-sized issues because I get more story out. I can have a higher price point for the book because it's going to be 40 to 60 pages, but I'm still keeping it as a floppy, which are intrinsically more collectible to the audience that comes to Kickstarter. So you can do those variant covers. And then I have to do less campaigns a year. That said, if you're looking to maximize every single dollar, even though it takes longer, I think the issue 1, issue 2, issue 3 that you build upon is the way to maximize all of your revenue. But I'm just at a point right now where I know I have enough fans to fund doing this. I would rather move a little bit quicker with how many issues of a series I can put out in a year. And financially, it's working really well for me.
Are you seeing a massive drop off in I guess, revenue per issue, like doing the double? Is it, what's the what how much are you losing off the top, you know, doing them at the same time instead of individually? If you don't
Well,
mind.
I don't think I'm like so. It's a very hard question to answer in the sense that the dynamics of the double issue versus say we'll just take White Ash for an example. White
Mm-hmm.
Ash 5 was the last White Ash campaign I did. We had roughly 1,035 backers. The next White Ash campaign I did was White Ash 6 and 7 combined in an issue I called the White Ash Deluxe Edition. That had 1,350 backers. So we had an increase of over 300 backers coming to that campaign, which was going to offset any cost. You have to think about the shipping cost too. So for me, at this point, if it's 1,350 backers, that's probably at least 800 packages I'm going to send out. So if it's 800 packages that you're going to send out twice, then you have to stack that cost upon, and you have to stack the cost of printing it twice, of doing a print run. And each of my print runs is going to be like 3,000 copies. So you're looking at like So like you've got an extra 4,000 to, plus. So if I had the printing and shipping cost, I'm looking at an extra somewhere around $12,000 that I would have to factor in if I did it 2 separate campaigns. So for me, and for a lot of other reasons, and also just my own man hours of shipping out those packages, that's 800 packages less I have to ship out. Maybe ultimately the overall number that I might make, because like maybe one campaign would have been 50 and the next campaign would have been 45 or whatever, just like throwing out 2 numbers. So like that's 95K worth of revenue over 2 campaigns, but the costs for doing it differently would have been like another 20. So maybe I'm leaving 10 or 15K on the table, but the time that I have to do to, to ship it twice, to be able, and it doesn't, the amount of time it takes to get that story out is a lot longer. And then I could also do more campaigns a year. Trevor, do you think you'd look at doing something like that, or bigger issues? What's your average size for issue?
So it's gone up a little bit. So it was 24 for the first 4, 28 for 5, and then 32 for 6. And I thought, in the beginning, what I was hoping to do was gain traction and maybe do a double-sized last issue and put everything out. At the time, financially, it wouldn't have worked out, I think, well enough for me to have a substantial amount of art done to be able to feature much, and take care of my artists and make sure that they were paid on time. And I had also had a conversation with Dan DiDio where he had said, well, like if you don't have the content in the tank after, you don't want to leave your audience waiting because everything moves so fast, and you don't want them to kind of move on without you. And so, I didn't quite have the volume of material ready to do that double size, continue paying for art, and then start kind of splitting myself off into making art on this next project. But it's now that we're beginning to kind of open up those margins, it's easier for me to divide where that budget is going into maybe having one project moving concurrently with another and overlapping those launches so that we can kind of pick up steam. But I think right now I'm in this very transitional period where I'm wrapping up this first series, and I'm trying to I want to experiment moving into my second project, but also be mindful of the mistakes that I made earlier on. But like my next project is going to be like a 72-page book. I don't know. I think it's weird because between this, that, and then what comes after, the packaging model is so different between the 3 of them. I don't know if I really even have a conclusive idea on how to best answer your question, to be honest with you.
I would say I just want to hit one thing that you said there that you had gotten from Dan, who I think knows the direct market really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thought that you need to be releasing material very quickly on Kickstarter is not true. Because I think it's a different market where people have different expectations, and also you have a different connection with your readers. They're not going into a comic book shop to, looking at the big shelf and just being, lost in that and forgetting about your series. You can keep a connection going with your readers through updates, through, like you have all these other ways, these points of contact where you can keep your series in their mind, even if you're not putting out a new book. I think we only put out 3 issues of White Ash in a year once. And by that, I mean, we had 3 Kickstarters in a year. I think the last issue came out the subsequent year. I think as long as you are making points of contact with people, you can get them excited and keep growing the fan base. But I do think that I just like that's an important distinction between the direct market, which I think he's right. I think he's 100% right in the direct market, where if you go away too long, the stores don't want to keep ordering you like that. And that's the real rub in the direct market. It's not about the fans. It's not about the readers. It's about the stores who have to make the orders from the publishers. And they are looking for what's the new thing they can sell. And issue 4 of a series that hasn't come out for 3 months is not the thing that they're going to bring in new people. So they may, that goes to pull whatever people have, but they're not ordering any more than that. So like that's a very different mindset. I think it's really good advice, but maybe should be slightly tweaked for Kickstarter.
I appreciate that.
I got a follow-up, Charlie, because I agree with you on the whole. I feel like the beauty of Kickstarter, right, is that we all have like our different audiences. Like there's some overlap, certainly. But I always feel as if traditional wisdom doesn't have to apply because you can teach your audience. Like you said, there's numerous ways to communicate. There's Twitter, updates, etc. There's mailing lists and stuff like that. Do you feel as if you can like coach your audience how to receive said product, and therefore you can kind of like avoid some pitfalls or do some different things that's more advantageous for your schedule or what have you?
So I don't think I've ever thought about it in terms of schedule, but I do think, and this is something that I think you do a good job with, Stokes, is that you have to remember that it's not just the campaign. You are the product too. Now, I'm not going to go first and foremost that I'm the product and then the book is secondary. Like I always push, it's White Ash, it's Galarian, it's that universe. There's also the game. There's all these other things that I'm doing. It's in the White Ash universe. I'm branding it. But it's important to realize that anytime that you do a podcast, anytime that you're on Twitter, it's all part of the same global brand. And I hate to sound as corporate as saying that, because we all want to think it's about storytelling and it's about art, but it's how do you connect with people? And a big part of that is the storytelling. But the other part are all those pieces that fill in between when the different issues come out, And so it's like, how do you keep making contact? What do you want to put out there that people think of when they think of you? And so I think, I don't know if it's training your audience, but it's setting expectations, of who you are, of what kind of stories that you like to do. And I think I have a brand I've developed both on Twitter and in the creator community that gives me a lot of latitude with people to try things, because there's some kind of trust that's been endowed upon me by people, by the way I've acted, by the way I've branded myself, or the way I've conducted myself. It's the same thing with other people, and that helps you be able to tell the stories when people understand what you are doing. And I think it's the thing that companies need to be doing more of, that they're not. They need to give people a connection point. I go to this like this is one thing where I think Vault has it over a lot of the other smaller publishers. What kind of stories Vault usually tells. It's sci-fi, it's horror, it's fantasy. That's it. But aside from that, that's what they're doing. What a Zenoscope book is like, right? It's easier for the retailer to find the person that those books go to. So I think, publishers need to be doing that. Creators need to be developing their brand. And, your brand, in terms of what you write, can be anything. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a certain category, but you are also part of the brand that you put out there.
It's a great answer, Charlie. So We're about 10 minutes from wrapping up.
Can I get a quick question there real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about price points really quickly, like just very generally, because I think all three of us, new kids on the block, we're all about to change our page count, be it double, be it a trade, be it, like a graphic novel.
I don't know. I'd say new kids on the block, but maybe you're trying to be more in sync with what's currently happening on Kickstarter.
In sync, that is almost as dated as new kids on the block. So, like, I feel as if like a 20 to 28 page comic book, like that should be like $10 to $15, like for a floppy.
So okay, so like if you're looking at a standard 22 page comic, right, or 24, like the 24 page comic that you're going to get in comic book shops, which is usually like anywhere from 20 to 24 pages of material plus 8 pages of ads, right? Like, so a 32 page book, right? You're always doing things in the multiples of 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's either going to be a 24 page printed book or a 32 page printed book. I think right now on Kickstarter, if it's a, say, 20 to 24 pages of material, you can get away with $15 for the price point of that book plus shipping. It's got to be a really good book though, or it has to be a book that's really sexy. the sexy price range is stupid dumb. What people are able to get for what's the one that's live right now? Something Boo, Becca Boo, or which is well over like 80K, 90K. I mean, like, kudos to them. They are getting that bag and they are running with it. But I think the book itself is like 24 pages. And like, you can look at the price points of what people are willing to pay for sexy books. And I think like I looked at that because I was looking at KitTrack, and like their day one, they only had 240 backers or 250 backers on day one, something around that, which is good. They had like, I had a lot more. Like I had 700 and something backers on day one of Glarian. I had 35K on day one of Glarian, which was incredible. I was over the moon. I looked at them. They off 250 backers. They did like 41K. So like that price point is so high because people are paying dumb money for sexy covers. So if you're doing a sexy cover book, your scale is different than if you're not doing a sexy cover book. If you're doing a regular cover book, I think anywhere, like I always charge shipping on an edition. So we're just talking about the price of the book. If it's just the price of the book, I think you can, I would say you go for, if it's 20, I would go maybe 15, but you have an early bird special for 12 for a couple of days. That way your hardcore fans who are coming back to the book get a good price point. They're there on day one, something like that. That's what I would do. And then base that, and the variants are based off of that.
Okay, so like let's just assume that they're not sexy books, like they're just normal boring fiction. What about like 100+ page trade, like soft cover?
I think you're looking at like 25 to 30. There's not the same markups on trades as there are on single issue comics. And I don't necessarily think that's right, but it's what the market will bear. And I think if someone drops a 100-page trade and tries to charge $45 for it, most people are not going to pick that up. Like even look at my, like Glarian is a 100-page hardcover cover. It's oversized. I had an early bird special at $25 for that, with plus $5 shipping. So like that was a $30 like 11 by 7.5 hardcover for 100 pages for $25. Now I can do that because I know I'm going to get X number of backers, and I know that I can order down the road. I can order 2,500 to 3,000 copies of this thing to bring the price per unit down enough so that's a profitable point for me. So like these are all things you can take into account.
Like a 50-page graphic novel, like basically like almost like a deluxe, but a graphic novel.
Look at what Pat charged his last time out for Cheeky. Like I think that was like a 48-page book. You can see that price point, and like that's probably something. I know for White Ash Deluxe, if I think it off the top of my head, I think that was a 64-page floppy. I think I did 25 for the base tier and 30 for the variants, and didn't have any trouble moving those. You know, and again, like that seems really high if it was like if I said it was a 64-page graphic novel for 25, but when it's a 64-page floppy for 25, it's a collectible with variant covers, and you're comparing it to a single issue 20-page book at 15. So, you know, that kind of thing. I also base it off my own price scale. So if I charged X number of dollars for a 32-page book, if I'm putting out a 64-page book, I bump it up. If I put out a 28-page book, I would bump it down. So on my own scale.
All right.
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up? Because we've had, it seems like we had a pretty similar strategy when it comes to overprint to account for, you know, future sales channels. And particularly when I think about conventions, the buying habits are very different from what you're seeing online. And I'm wondering if when you're going to conventions, are you finding that you're willing to convert sales at the same price as the audience on Kickstarter who are willing to spend that extra money? Because I find that at conventions, people are a lot less willing to spend that type of Kickstarter money in person, and that their buying habits tend to reflect a little bit more closely to those in the direct market.
So yeah, I think you have to look at Kickstarter. It's the early adapter market, right? And there's often an early adapter tax. So what I try to do is only offer things like some of the variants I will offer on Kickstarter I won't bring to a convention. But maybe say the Glarian number 2 that was $15 plus whatever on Kickstarter, I'll sell for $10 at a convention 4 or 5 months later. I'll also, though, I will do bundles at conventions, you know, because my goal at conventions is to get new readers who I can then hook, who will then come back and back things on the Kickstarters. So you're thinking about, it's not necessarily about trying to get the same price point, because it's about getting them hooked on the series. And I'll do that with new readers too, right? You know, you want to make things accessible for your new readers coming to whatever you're doing. Find ways to get them into you and what you do. And then down the road, you know, once they're in, you know, let's say the first taste is free, or the first taste is only $5 or $10. You're going to have to pay to get the whole thing later on.
Gotcha.
Damn, Charlie's making addicts out here.
But no, but that's business. That's business.
No, absolutely. So yeah, we're wrapping down. We got about 2 more minutes before we want to end stream. So let's let everyone do their last. What's up?
The post-credits talk?
Oh, you want to do post-credits talk?
I do, just like 5 minutes.
All right, yeah, go ahead. You can spit. I know you want to be vindicated.
I do want to be vindicated. Okay, so I saw Ant-Man 3, and it was not great, to be honest with you. Oh, the solo, that's back. It's not great, and I got to talking about post-credit scenes. My question to the panel: are post-credit scenes, 1, do you consider that part of the movie? 2, can it make the movie better or worse? And you know, maybe not by a lot, but at all. Does that move the needle at all? I would say yes. I would say yes unequivocally, because it can add to the narrative. It can recontextualize the main movie. And if done right, it should add to the overall experience.
Yeah, who wants to answer next? Trevor, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I think it comes down to basic psychology, right? Like if it's a bad post-credit scene and the last thing you see of this movie is not good, then that's gonna color your entire experience, you know? I think a good post-credit scene needs to kind of have, you know what? I don't even know if there is a set series of requirements for post-credit scene, but at the end of the day, like if you walk out with something surprising and that is additive to the overall, you know, mythology of what's being built in the film, then yeah, like you're gonna walk out a much happier camper. You know, I certainly think that.
I just want to know if No, okay.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Yeah, please, no one spoil Ant-Man 3 because I haven't seen it yet. But anyways, yeah, no, I think it's basic psychology. It just comes down to like, what is the last thing you're seeing? How are you responding to that? And that will in turn like affect your entire experience at the end of the day.
Charlie, do you have a take?
On post-credit scenes?
Yeah, on Stokes'.
Specifically, are they part of the movie, and can they affect the overall quality of the movie?
I don't know about the overall quality of the movie, but it depends on who you're talking about. It's become a trope with Marvel. So it's part of the experience of watching a Marvel movie. And so that's part of the overall narrative. Sometimes it recontextualizes what you've seen because it's showing, oh, this was really this all along. There's this story, this set up that. So it helps give something. So I don't think you can separate it if it's a Marvel movie. Now, Tar, which I just watched the other day, if that had a post-credit scene, I didn't know about it. And I feel like, like there's certain movies you don't expect the post-credit scene. And if they just tag them in, then I think that's really odd and not part of the movie. But part of the visual language of watching a particular type of movie, you've come to expect them. So I think it's hard to separate them from, you're not surprised. You just want to know how many there are when you go into the movie. How much of the credits do I have to watch to see that final piece, that final reveal? I will say this as someone who worked in the film industry. I think it's really great that there's now an excuse for people to stay and watch the credits. Because it used to be the minute the credits rolled, like 90% of the theater got up and rushed out, right? Oh my God, I've got to go to the bathroom. I got to get some food. I got to get into the car. And like all those people who worked on the film, no one knows who they are. They just know the actors who got their credits at the beginning of the movie because they're contractually obligated to have them there. So people see who they are before they walk out. So I think it's been great for that. For all those people who work on films to get a little recognition.
Definitely.
What do you think, Chris?
So I would say obviously part of the film, and I don't think it like we had in our private chat and on Twitter. I don't think it can make or break a movie, but I do think it could help color like how you felt about that movie, right? And like if you go to see a Marvel movie and it was kind of mid, and then you wait like 20 minutes for all the credits, and then the post-credit scene is fuck you for saying, you dumbass, why didn't you go home, you stupid ass, like now you've been sitting in the sticky seat for another fucking 20 minutes, like then I'm like, what? Like now I really hate this goddamn movie. You know what I mean?
What movie are you watching, Chris?
I don't know, man. Yeah, am I the only one that goes to movie theaters with sticky seats? That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think you go to the wrong theater.
I'm exposing myself. I'm saying too much. All right, everyone.
That's a different type of movie theater than the ones I go to, and those don't traditionally have post-credit scenes.
I just imagine. Remember Home Alone? He was walking on like the fly paper, and he's like his shoes were coming off and his socks. I guess that's Chris leaving Ant-Man 3.
Yeah, that's the floor of the movie theaters I go to. So Charlie, you have the floor. If you want to give us a quick your elevator pitch for Galarian.
So Galarian follows the world's White Ash's most dangerous elf from her early oat sowing days in Elfheim to her latter years in White Ash, Pennsylvania. They are 8 standalone stories, but together they form an arc that fill in some of who Galarian is and also some of the backstory of the White Ash universe. We'll be live on Kickstarter for another 15 days, so check us out and give me a follow at Charles Stickney on Twitter, and I'm always happy to talk Kickstarter or any other part of comics and self-publishing.
Awesome. Trevor.
Sheesh. I have not organized myself to such a degree. But the you said the pitch for the book, right?
Yep.
Area 51, The Helix Project is a sci-fi thriller about a child from 2 worlds who's forced to excavate the trauma of his past when his father's murder is placed into question. Driven to uncover the circumstances, he's dropped into the jaw of a Cold War genetics conspiracy and forced to face a twisted ghost from his past that challenges everything he knows about himself and what it means to be human. So a deeply personal story, something that I believe in full-heartedly. And what's really cool is you get a sci-fi story by somebody with a background in molecular and cellular biology. So I get to feel like I didn't waste my college education or the money that I spent on it, at least not as bad. So if you want to check it out, we have the entire series on the campaign ready for you right now. A lot of beautiful, beautiful artwork from talent from all around the world. And you get to kind of watch and go through the series and watch me grow from the earliest stage in my career, the very beginning. This is my first project, to where I am now, which I think has been pretty tremendous. And I hope you'll give it a chance.
Awesome. Mr. Stokes, Luigi.
It's gas.
Damn.
It's gas.
Spitting.
It's gas.
And I also have a pre-launch link that's up right now for the Saturn Effect issues 1 through 5. We're coming back. First issue of volume 2. So everyone make sure to go check that out. Charlie, Trevor, Stokes, thank you all for being here on this Monday. And I wish you all great luck on the end of your campaigns. I hope you all get another $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And thanks for talking Kickstarter. Thanks for teaching us all how to make more money. And hopefully we'll be raising these Kickstarter ships, and we'll have a few more six figures to hang out with Mr. Six Figure Shand, who was in the chat with us today. But Super Comic Books fam, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one.